June 19, 1944. A volcanic island, black sand stretching to the horizon, a runway shimmering under unbearable heat. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi steps down from the transport plane. In his hands, a single order signed by Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. Defend this island to the last man. If you knew that stepping onto this soil meant certain death, would you still walk forward? The island is only 8 square miles wide, yet it holds the fate of nations. To the south rises Mount Suribachi, silent but waiting to become the stage of a tragedy. The men who follow Kuribayashi already sense it. No one will leave alive. He himself told his wife, "Not even my ashes will return." This is not merely a story of military orders. It is a story of honor, desperation, and the courage of men caught in a storm greater than themselves. The name of this place will be carved forever into the memory of World War II, Iwo Jima. The story of Iwo Jima begins not with explosions, but with decisions made in silence behind closed doors. On June 8, 1944, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi was summoned for a rare audience with Emperor Hirohito. Few officers were given such an honor. The message was clear. He would be sent to command the defense of a small volcanic island halfway between Tokyo and the American bases in the Marianas. In truth, it was both an honor and a death sentence. Kuribayashi knew the weight of the task. Unlike many of his peers, he had lived in the United States as a military attaché in Washington, D.C., and studied briefly at Harvard. He had driven across the wide plains of America, visited its steel mills, and written home to his wife. The United States is the last country in the world Japan should fight. Its industrial power is immense, its people energetic and determined. Such words, so grounded in reality, had marked him as a defeatist among the ultra-nationalists in Tokyo. Now, those same realists understood he was the best man for a mission that was never intended to succeed. When he arrived on Iwo Jima, Kuribayashi immediately abandoned the traditional Japanese strategy of meeting the enemy on the beaches. He had studied the disaster of Tarawa, where Japanese defenses had been obliterated by naval gunfire before the Marines even landed. He had read reports of Saipan, where suicidal banzai charges achieved nothing but slaughter. On Iwo Jima, he would not waste lives on hopeless gestures. Instead, he conceived a new kind of defense, one that would turn the entire island into a fortress. Work began almost at once. 25% of the garrison, nearly 1 soldier in 4, was ordered to dig, blast, and carve tunnels into the volcanic rock. They worked in heat that soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit underground, collapsing from exhaustion as the stone radiated the fury of the earth itself. Engineers designed a complex system, 18 kilometers of tunnels linking bunkers, artillery positions, and command posts. Ventilation shafts were cut to channel fresh air and to survive the shock waves of bombs. Mount Suribachi, looming over the southern beaches, was honeycombed with thousands of yards of tunnels. Kuribayashi established his command post 20 meters below the surface in the northern highlands, connected by 150 meters of passageways. From here, he could communicate with all sectors. His voice carried through wires strung in suffocating caverns. The defenses grew into one of the most elaborate systems of fortification in the Pacific War. Reinforced concrete pillboxes with walls 4 feet thick were built using volcanic ash mixed with cement, stronger than anything American bombardments had yet faced. 300 anti-aircraft guns, 33 naval guns, 438 artillery pieces, and 69 anti-tank guns were hidden and camouflaged. Colonel Baron Takechi Nishi's 22 tanks, stripped of mobility after losing the originals to submarine attacks, were buried up to their turrets, transformed into fixed fortresses. Kuribayashi's philosophy broke with centuries of tradition. He forbade the banzai charge. He told his men, "Every soldier must kill 10 Americans before he dies." We will not waste ourselves in meaningless glory. We will make them pay. This order shocked many officers, particularly Vice Admiral Sadayoshi Matsunaga, who argued for beach defenses. Kuribayashi removed him from command, replacing him with Rear Admiral Toshinosuke Ichimaru, who cooperated with the new vision. Yet for all the discipline, conditions were inhumane. Supplies were scarce from the first day. Water had to be carried by submarine, food was rationed, and medicine was almost non-existent. Soldiers lived in caves cut from sulfurous rock, their lungs filled with poisonous gas, their skin blistered with heat, rash, and disease. Dysentery and malaria spread unchecked. Many died before the Americans even landed. Kuribayashi refused privileges. When water rations were cut, he drank no more than the lowest private. When men lay wounded, he visited them personally in the underground hospitals, something almost unheard of among Japan's high command. His letters to his wife in late 1944 are filled with resignation and tenderness. "You must not expect my survival. The enemy will come soon and we must share the fate of Saipan. Take care of the children, for the future will not be easy." By early 1945, over 20,000 men, soldiers, sailors, conscripts, and even support personnel pressed into combat, were packed onto the island. Kuribayashi set February 11th as the deadline for final preparations. When American B-24 and B-25 bombers began 74 straight days of raids, the longest pre-invasion bombardment of the Pacific War, the garrison hid underground, enduring explosions that shook the island to its core. The airfields above were shattered, but beneath the surface, the fortress survived. What American reconnaissance failed to see was that the island had become a death trap. Every ridge, every ravine, every cave had been wired into a killing zone. The beaches were left deceptively unguarded. Kuribayashi had prepared his men to hold out for as long as possible, to bleed the Americans in a war of attrition. And so, as February 1945 approached, the stage was set. The United States believed the garrison numbered only 13 to 15,000. In truth, more than 20,000 defenders waited in the tunnels. They were hungry, thirsty, and sick, but determined to obey their commander's final order. This was not a defense for victory. It was a defense for history. A defense meant to echo across the ages of World War II, showing what desperate men could endure when told to fight until none remained. At dawn on February 19, 1945, the horizon off Iwo Jima was lined with steel. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers unleashed fire that shook the earth. For 3 days, the bombardment rained down, 22,000 shells in total. Major General Harry Schmidt had asked for 10 days of fire, but weather and high command gave him only 3. American commanders believed the defenders had been shattered. From the air, it looked convincing. Airfields were cratered, surface buildings leveled. Intelligence estimated perhaps 13 to 15,000 defenders, not the 21,000 hiding underground. The Marines of the 4th and 5th Divisions prepared to land with confidence. At 08:59 hours, the first wave of amphibious tractors crawled toward the southern beaches. Marines jumped into water that foamed with volcanic ash. They sank ankle-deep in black sand, every step a struggle. Vehicles bogged down, wheels spinning uselessly. Yet, as they moved forward, something felt strange. Resistance was light. No storm of bullets greeted them. The beaches seemed eerily quiet. Kuribayashi's order was working. He had commanded his men to hold fire until the beaches were full. For nearly 30 minutes, 30,000 Marines pushed forward with little opposition. Then, at his signal, the island erupted. Every gun hidden in caves, every mortar, every artillery piece opened fire in unison. The beaches became killing grounds. Pre-registered coordinates ensured deadly accuracy. Machine guns swept the approaches, cutting down men who had nowhere to hide. Marines dove into the loose sand, but it offered no cover. Shells exploded among landing craft. Men screamed for medics. Bodies lay twisted in the volcanic dust. By nightfall, over 500 Marines were dead, nearly 2,000 wounded, and the battle had only begun. That night, Marines braced for the familiar Japanese banzai charge. They had seen it on Saipan and Tarawa, waves of screaming men throwing themselves into machine gun fire. But the night passed with only probing attacks. Kuribayashi had forbidden such waste. His defenders would fight from the ground itself, unseen, unyielding. The focus soon turned to Mount Suribachi, the volcanic cone that loomed over the landing beaches. From its slopes, hidden guns poured fire onto the Marines. Taking it was essential. The 28th Marine Regiment was given the task. For 3 days they fought yard by yard through pillboxes that seemed indestructible. Flamethrowers spat fire into tunnels, grenades cleared bunkers, explosives collapsed entrances. The Japanese defenders melted into the underground network, reappearing to strike again. Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi commanded the Suribachi garrison of nearly 2,000 men. He fought with determination, retreating only when survival demanded it. For the Marines, progress was brutal and slow. Specialized flamethrower teams suffered casualty rates above 90%, their fuel tanks exploding when hit. Tank support proved vital, blasting apart cave entrances one by one. On the morning of February 23rd, after 3 days of relentless combat, a Marine patrol reached the summit. At 10:20 hours, they raised a small American flag. The sight electrified the men below. Across the beachhead, Marines cheered, ships blew horns, wounded men lifted themselves to sea, but Kuribayashi's defenders still fought beneath the mountain. Later that day, another patrol carried a larger flag to the top. Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal captured the moment in an image that would become one of the most famous photographs in history. 6 Marines straining against the wind, lifting the stars and stripes above the ash. It became a symbol not only of victory on Iwo Jima, but of American resolve in World War II. Yet the reality was far from victory. Suribachi was only one part of the island. Beneath the surface, Japanese defenders continued their underground war, striking from hidden chambers, disappearing into the tunnels. The flag on the summit inspired hope, but it did not end the slaughter. For Kuribayashi, Suribachi's fall was expected. He had concentrated his strength in the north, where broken ridges, ravines, and caves offered natural advantages. Suribachi was a sacrifice, a distraction, while the true test awaited in what the Marines would come to call the meat grinder. Still, for those who fought and bled on its slopes, the battle for Mount Suribachi was unforgettable. It was a contest of fire and steel, of men dragging themselves forward inch by inch, of courage and exhaustion mingled in the volcanic ash. The flag that flew there was more than cloth, it was a promise that the sacrifice would not be in vain. If Mount Suribachi was the gateway, the northern highlands were the heart of hell. The Marines who advanced beyond the beaches soon entered a landscape designed to kill. Broken ridges, jagged ravines, and volcanic caves had been transformed by Kuribayashi's engineers into an interlocking system of fire. The Marines gave these places names that revealed their horror: the Meat Grinder, Turkey Knob, Hill 382, Amphitheater, and Bloody Gorge. Each name marked not a single position, but a labyrinth of bunkers, tunnels, and gun pits that had to be destroyed one by one. What made these defenses so lethal was their resilience. A position blasted apart by naval shells in the morning would erupt with gunfire again by nightfall, defenders crawling back through hidden tunnels. Every advance required flamethrowers, grenades, and demolition charges. Flamethrower teams, burdened with heavy fuel tanks, became priority targets for the Japanese. Casualty rates for these men reached 90%, yet their fire was essential. Without the sheets of flame pouring into tunnels, the Marines could not move forward. Tank battalions joined the grim work. Specially modified Sherman tanks, the M4A3R3 Zippo flame tanks, belched fire into caves, consuming oxygen and searing everything inside. By the height of the battle, a single Marine division was using between 5,000 and 10,000 gallons of napalm each day. The island's sulfurous air became a choking mixture of smoke and burning fuel. Still, the Japanese fought with desperation. Starvation set in. Water was nearly gone. Ammunition dwindled until rifles fired single shots meant to count for 10. Wounded men lay untreated, dying in darkness without morphine or bandages. And yet they resisted, obeying Kuribayashi's command: kill as many Americans as possible before death. Among them was Colonel Baron Takechi Nishi, once a glamorous Olympic gold medalist in equestrian sport, a man who had dined in Hollywood and befriended actors like Charlie Chaplin. His tanks, sunk en route by American submarines, had been buried into the ground and fought as immobile guns. As the battle ground on, his regiment fought as infantry, clinging to defensive holes in the northern ridges. American intelligence officers broadcast appeals to him, urging surrender, reminding him of the world's admiration for his achievements. He never answered. By late March, Nishi was dead. Whether he fell in combat or ended his life in ritual suicide remains uncertain. His body was never found. For Kuribayashi, the end approached as steadily as the American advance. On March 16th, he sent a message to Tokyo: "I comfort myself seeing my officers and men die without regret after struggling inch by inch against an overwhelming enemy with many tanks and indescribable bombardment." On March 17th, his final transmission was even starker. "Our strength is now about 400. Tanks have penetrated our last defense line. We continue to fight. I am sorry indeed we could not hold the island." The Marines were stunned by the cost. Pre-invasion estimates had predicted the island could be taken in 5 days. Instead, by the third week, casualties had already surpassed expectations. By the time the battle ended, American losses would total over 26,000, including nearly 7,000 dead. It was the only major battle of the Pacific where American casualties exceeded those of the Japanese, even though Japanese deaths were nearly total. The end came on March 25th, when 300 surviving Japanese mounted a final banzai attack, the very tactic Kuribayashi had forbidden. By then, discipline had shattered. His body was never recovered. Rear Admiral Ichimaru also died in the final chaos. Of more than 21,000 defenders, barely 1,000 survived, most of them too wounded to resist capture. The Marines declared the island secured on March 26th. But the fighting did not end. For weeks, small groups of Japanese emerged from tunnels to scavenge for food or water, attacking when cornered. Some remained hidden for years. 2 soldiers finally surrendered in 1949, nearly 4 years after the war's end. The cost was staggering, yet strategically, Iwo Jima proved vital. By war's end, more than 2,000 B-29 bombers made emergency landings on the island, saving nearly 25,000 airmen who might otherwise have perished over the Pacific. From its airfields, P-51 Mustangs flew escort all the way to Tokyo, ensuring the destruction of Japanese industry. The island became both tomb and triumph. For the Americans, it was a victory drenched in blood, a symbol of sacrifice and perseverance. For the Japanese, it was the grave of an entire garrison, remembered as noble but futile resistance. And for history, it was a turning point that foreshadowed the unimaginable cost of invading the Japanese homeland, a cost so high it influenced the decision to use atomic weapons instead. Thus, in the northern highlands of Iwo Jima, amid the smoke and ashes, the price of war was measured not in land gained, but in lives burned away. It was here that the battle reached its darkest intensity, a place where valor and suffering became inseparable, where the legacy of World War II was carved in volcanic stone. The battle for Iwo Jima ended on March 26, 1945, after 36 days of relentless struggle. Yet for many, the war on that island never truly ended. Thousands of Japanese soldiers remained entombed in tunnels beneath the volcanic rock, their families left with no graves to visit. For the Marines who survived, the memory of the black sand, the sulfurous air, and the cries of comrades lost would haunt them for a lifetime. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, reflecting on the cost, declared, "Among the Americans who served on Iwo Jima, uncommon valor was a common virtue." It was more than a tribute. It was a recognition that ordinary men, thrust into extraordinary circumstances, had endured the unimaginable. 27 medals of honor were awarded, more than in any other battle of the Marine Corps. For Japan, Iwo Jima became a symbol of sacrifice, without victory. General Kuribayashi, Baron Nishi, and Admiral Ichimaru fought with determination, knowing the outcome was hopeless. Their courage was recognized even by their enemies. For the United States, the island's airfield saved more than 20,000 airmen, turning tragedy into strategic necessity. The meaning of Iwo Jima stretches beyond military strategy. It represents the ultimate paradox of World War II, courage and honor displayed on both sides, yet all in service of destruction. It foreshadowed the devastating calculations that led to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, decisions driven by the fear of repeating the nightmare of Iwo Jima on the Japanese mainland. Decades later, reconciliation replaced hatred. Veterans of both nations met again on the island, old men walking battlefields where they had once tried to kill each other. They showed one another the tunnels, the positions, the scars still etched in the earth. They prayed together, wept together, and remembered together. The black sand that once drank blood now witnessed handshakes and shared silence. Today, Iwo Jima, officially called Iwo To, is a restricted memorial. American and Japanese monuments stand side by side. The tunnels remain, silent chambers of memory. The flag that once flew over Suribachi has become an enduring icon, immortalized in bronze at Arlington. The legacy of Iwo Jima is not only about who won or lost, it is about the price of war and the dignity of those who bore it. It reminds us that peace must be fought for with as much determination as war itself. In the story of World War II, Iwo Jima is a chapter written in blood, courage, and reconciliation. It teaches that even the fiercest enemies can one day become partners in peace. So we ask, what will we do with that legacy? Will we remain silent, or will we raise our voices for peace, for justice, for freedom? The men of Iwo Jima cannot answer, but we can. If this story touched your heart, honor their memory, leave a comment, eliminate fascism, fight for peace, fight for national independence, fight for justice, fight for freedom. Share this story, because the lessons of World War II must never be forgotten.